It is Wednesday, February 25th, 2026. And if you've been scrolling through the headlines this morning, you probably have that same knot in your stomach that I do.
Yeah, it is definitely a heavy news day.
It really is. It feels like the geopolitical temperature didn't just rise, the thermometer actually just shattered. So, welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and I'm here with our resident geopolitical expert to really unpack a massive, massive puzzle today involving the United States, Israel, and Iran.
Thanks for having me. And you're right, it is a significant day. I mean, maybe a defining day for this administration. The reports coming out this morning, they paint a picture of a strategy that is just incredibly high stakes.
Right. And for everyone listening, our mission today is to cut through the noise. We're looking at reporting from Politico, Axios, CBS News, the Financial Times, and we're even digging into some hard military data from CSIS. Because we aren't just reading the headlines. We want to figure out the why and the how behind them.
Exactly. And frankly, if this reporting is accurate, it's a strategy that completely flips the traditional script of American power right on its head.
That is exactly what stuck out to me reading the Politico piece this morning. Because usually the assumption is that the superpower, the U.S. sets the tempo, right? We lead and allies follow.
Right. That's standard doctrine.
But this report suggests that President Trump's senior advisors are pushing for a scenario where Israel strikes Iran first, without the U.S. firing the opening shot. It just feels, I don't know, counterintuitive.
It is completely counterintuitive, but there is a very specific, somewhat Machiavellian logic to it. The administration essentially believes it's politically advantageous for Israel to be the one to kick the door down.
Okay, so let's start right there with the strategy itself, this Israel-first approach. I read this report 3 times this morning to make sure I wasn't completely misunderstanding it. Advisors are telling the president to let the Israelis go first. Why? Is this just about plausible deniability? Because nobody is going to believe the U.S. wasn't involved.
No, it's not about deniability at all. It's about justification. The source in Politico was extremely blunt about this. The calculation inside the West Wing is that if Israel attacks first, Iran is almost guaranteed to retaliate.
Right, they have to respond.
Exactly. But Iran won't just hit Tel Aviv. They will target U.S. Central Command assets. So we're talking bases in Iraq, ships in the Gulf, supply depots in Jordan.
Because Iran views the U.S. and Israel as essentially two sides of the same coin in this conflict.
Precisely. So the thinking goes, if Iran strikes U.S. forces in retaliation for an Israeli attack, that suddenly gives the U.S. administration the public justification, the moral high ground, essentially, to launch a broader, devastating offensive of its own.
Wow.
It shifts the entire narrative from the U.S. started a preemptive war to the U.S. is defending its troops from an unprovoked attack.
Well, it's a trap.
Yeah.
Or a provocation. It sounds like they are literally using the inevitable Iranian response as a permission slip.
That's a very accurate way to put it. One source told Politico, and this is a direct quote, "There's a sense inside and around the administration that the policy is much better if the Israelis go first and alone and the Iranians retaliate against us and give us more reason to act."
Give us more reason to act. That phrasing is chilling.
It really is.
It implies the decision to act has already been made. They're just waiting for the right lighting conditions to shoot the scene.
Which makes the other big news from today even more bizarre. Because while we are sitting here discussing war plans and traps, there is a diplomatic team packing their bags for Geneva right now.
The proxy talk. I almost forgot about that because the war rhetoric is so loud right now. A third round of indirect nuclear talks is supposed to start tomorrow, on Thursday.
Precisely. You have diplomats preparing to sit in a hotel in Geneva to negotiate a cool down. But at the exact same time, sources close to the president are telling reporters, quote, "We're going to bomb them, regardless of what happens in Geneva."
That feels like a massive disconnect, because usually you use military threats to gain leverage in negotiations. But this sounds like the negotiations are just smoke, and the military option is the actual primary plan.
It really suggests that faith in the diplomatic solution is effectively zero within the inner circle right now. They aren't looking at if conflict happens, they are planning the when and the how.
Okay, so let's look at the how. Because if the trap is sprung, Israel hits, Iran hits back, and then the U.S. joins the fray, what does that actually look like? The reporting mentions a whole spectrum of violence here. Are we talking about, like, a few cruise missiles at a nuclear facility or something bigger?
The menu of options is broad, but the president seems to be leaning toward the extreme end. On the lighter side, you have a limited strike designed to just pressure Tehran into a deal, a muscle flex.
Right.
But the Wall Street Journal is reporting that Trump is keeping the door open for a large-scale campaign targeting the regime's leadership infrastructure.
And this brings us to that phrase I saw in the Axios reporting, decapitation strike. That is not a term military planners use lightly.
No, it is the absolute most extreme option on the table. The reporting indicates this wouldn't just be about hitting military sites or centrifuges. It specifically targets the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Wow.
But here is the detail that really caught my eye. It also targets his son, Muqtada Khamenei.
Muqtada. I know he's been taking a more public role lately, but why specifically target the son?
Because Muqtada is widely viewed as the successor. The regime has been quietly grooming him to take over. So targeting both the father and the son isn't just about removing the current commander-in-chief, it's about erasing the future of the dynasty.
It's an attempt to break the chain of command permanently.
Exactly.
But, I mean, that is regime change. You can call it a strike all you want, but that is a fundamental attempt to topple a government.
It absolutely is. And this is where the reporting gets really interesting regarding the president's mindset. CBS News notes that Trump is frustrated with the standard military options.
How so?
He thinks they are too slow, too grinding. He wants something decisive. He wants another Venezuela.
Okay, we need to pause on that. The Venezuela model. Because the administration keeps bringing this up. And for the listeners who might have tuned out the South American news last fall, we're talking about the operation that ousted Nicolas Maduro.
Right. And remember, that was a lightning-fast operation. It wasn't a ground war. It was this highly coordinated fusion of cyber warfare, special operations, and incredibly precise intelligence that essentially severed the head of the Maduro regime overnight.
The government collapsed, Maduro was out, and U.S. casualties were virtually zero.
Exactly. And the president looks at that and says, do that in Iran. He sees it as the new model for American warfare. Clean, fast, decisive.
But the military planners are practically screaming that Iran is not Venezuela.
Not even close.
I mean, just look at the map. Caracas is a coastal city. Tehran is surrounded by the Zagros Mountains. The geography alone makes it a nightmare for special operations.
It's not just the geography, it's the capability of the adversary. The Venezuelan military was crumbling from the inside out. They were demoralized. The IRGC in Iran is a hardened, deeply ideological force with bunkers buried hundreds of feet under those mountains. You cannot just special ops your way into toppling the Ayatollah in a weekend.
But the desire for that Venezuela outcome, that quick political win, is what's driving the strategy. And that brings us to the part of the deep dive that actually scared me, the logistics.
The math.
Yes, the math. Because if you want to fight a massive war with Iran, you need bullets. And according to the Financial Times, we might not have enough.
This is where the constraints of reality are just crashing head-on into political ambition. The numbers are genuinely alarming. Israeli intelligence has made an assessment that the United States can only sustain intensive airstrikes against Iran for 4 to 5 days.
4 to 5 days. When I read that, I honestly thought it was a typo. We are the United States of America. We spend nearly $1 trillion a year on defense. How is it possible that we run out of ammo in less than a week?
Well, to be fair, U.S. defense analysts do push back slightly on that Israeli assessment. They say we could stretch it to a few weeks. But the fundamental reason for the shortage is entirely valid, and it's something we all lived through very recently. We are still suffering the hangover from June 2025.
The 3-day exchanges.
Exactly. The conflict between Israel and Iran last summer, we all remember the footage. The sky over Tel Aviv lighting up like a disco ball with interceptions. It looked like science fiction.
It really did.
But keeping that shield up cost an absolute fortune in high-end munitions.
And we never replenished the stock.
We're trying. But you can't just 3D print a standard missile 3 overnight. The defense industrial base takes years to churn these out. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, they actually ran the numbers on this. They estimate that in just those few days in 2025, the U.S. fired up to 20% of its entire global inventory of standard Missile 3 interceptors.
20%. And just to clarify for everyone listening, the SM-3 isn't some small tactical rocket. This is the heavy hitter.
Right. This is the system designed to hit a ballistic missile outside the Earth's atmosphere. It is essentially hitting a bullet with a bullet in space. The tech is incredibly complex, and we burned through a fifth of our global supply in a single weekend.
And the numbers for the SOD system are even worse, aren't they?
Much worse. The estimate is that between 20 and 50% of our THAAD inventory was expended. So when Israeli intelligence says 4 to 5 days, They aren't saying we run out of offensive bombs to drop on Iran.
Right.
They are saying we run out of the shields needed to protect our own ships and bases from what Iran shoots back.
That is the critical distinction. It's not about offense, it's about defense. If we launch this decapitation strike, Iran fires back. And if we've used up half our shields already, the USS Gerald R. Ford, which is sitting in the region right now, becomes a very big, very expensive target.
Precisely. And this is where the global picture complicates things even further, because the Pentagon isn't just looking at the Middle East right now. They're staring very hard at the Pacific.
The China factor.
Exactly. Tom Carrico, the director of the Missile Defense Project at CSIS, was very clear about this trade-off. He warned that every single munition we use in the Middle East is one less we have for a potential conflict with China.
So we are essentially budgeting our wars. We're treating ammo like a savings account that is already overdrawn.
We are. Carrico said, quote, "It's the strike munitions that we also need to manage and conserve to deter or wage war with China. If you fire 1,000 Tomahawks at mountain bunkers in Tehran today, and then a crisis kicks off in the Taiwan Strait 2 months from now, the cupboard is completely bare."
That puts the president in an impossible bind. He wants this Venezuela-style knockout blow. But the military is telling him, we don't have the inventory to sustain a long fight, and if we use everything now, we are practically naked in the Pacific.
And yet, despite all those warnings, the political strategy, the Israel First idea, is still pushing forward. It creates a scenario where we might purposefully start a war that we literally cannot afford to finish.
And if the math doesn't add up, the people who actually pay the price are the troops on the ground. Because going back to that very first point, the entire strategy relies on Iran retaliating against U.S. forces to provide the justification.
That is the grim reality of it. We are essentially baiting a reaction. A source told Politico that there is a, quote, high probability of American casualties.
High probability. That's just bureaucratic speak for soldiers are going to die.
Yes, and unlike Israel, our troops in the region don't have an iron dome over every single tent. Israel has the most dense air defense network on Earth. U.S. assets, our bases in Iraq, our supply lines in Syria, our logistics hubs, they are scattered across a massive area. They are highly vulnerable.
And as we just established, the high-end interceptors needed to protect them, the Tash-Age and the Patriots, are in dangerously short supply.
Exactly. You see how all these puzzle pieces fit together into a very, very dangerous picture. We have a political desire for a massive regime-ending strike. We have a trigger mechanism that intentionally invites an attack on our own troops. And we have logistical reports saying our defensive shield is thinner than it has been in decades.
It feels like we are walking a tightrope over a canyon and someone is actively greasing the wire.
That is a very fair assessment, because the military assessment is clear. If the U.S. attempts a regime change scale attack, Iran will retaliate with everything it has, and we might not have everything we need to stop it.
So let's try to summarize this for the listener, because there are a lot of moving parts we covered today. We have a political report stating the administration wants Israel to strike first to create a pretext for the U.S. to join the war.
Correct.
We have a president pushing for a Venezuela-style decisive blow, potentially killing the Khamenei leadership, despite military advice that Iran is way too tough for a quick knockout.
Yeah.
And looming over all of this is the hangover from the June 2025 war. We burned through our best missiles, we haven't replaced them, and we are hoarding what's left in case China makes a move.
That is the landscape. It is a direct collision between political will and mathematical reality.
And meanwhile, diplomats are checking into their hotels in Geneva, pretending that peace is still the primary option on the table.
It really highlights the duality of modern foreign policy. You have the velvet glove in Geneva and the iron fist, albeit a potentially rusting iron fist, being clenched in the Situation Room.
For everyone listening, when you see the news in the coming days, pay close attention. If you see a report of an Israeli strike, don't just view it as an isolated incident.
No. Context is everything here. If Israel strikes, look at the clock. Watch how quickly the U.S. responds, and look at the narrative that emerges. If the U.S. cites self-defense after an Iranian retaliation, you will know that the Israel First playbook is officially in motion.
It is a sobering look at the constraints of war. We so often think of superpowers as having infinite resources, but 2026 is proving that even superpowers have strict limits.
They do. And if I could leave you with one final thought to chew on today, consider the exit strategy.
Okay.
If the military planners are right that a decisive blow like Venezuela just isn't possible in Iran, but the political strategy relies on provoking a fight to attempt one anyway, are we walking into a conflict where the exit is mathematically impossible based on our current stockpiles? If you start a war you can only afford to fight for 5 days, what happens on the morning of day 6?
That is the question I think we will all be asking. Thank you for diving deep with us today. We'll be watching the headlines closely. Stay safe out there.
See you next time.